From Wonderland Elementary, this is Art News with Edna Egelhofer.
Good evening and welcome to Art News, the only news site with hard-hitting interviews with today's most famous contemporary artists. Tonight we will be interviewing contemporary artist Mickalene Thomas. Mickalene Thomas is an American artist who is based in Brooklyn. Please introduce yourself, Ms. Thomas.
Hi, I'm Mickalene Thomas.
Now, Ms. Thomas, your artworks, which include paintings and photo collages, uses a lot of non-traditional materials, meaning it's not just paint that you use such materials as glitter, rhinestones, fabric, yarn. Can you describe why you use such non-traditional materials?
I guess my appeal to craft materials is also another historical reference to women making art. When I was in undergrad, I couldn't always afford oil paint. And so because I was in a school and still had to make work, I had to figure out ways in which to still make my art and not limit myself to I can't make my art because I don't have oil paint or acrylic paint. So I gravitated toward non-traditional materials that were considered maybe for some a low art, but also to others a high art if you look at outsider artists, right? And so I began going to Michael's craft stores because I could afford felt, and I can afford yarn, and I can afford these little bags of rhinestones or glitter, and you know, I could get like an abundance of those versus to a tube of paint. And so I began to acquire these materials and find meanings and ways to use them in my own work as a way of identifying myself, but also making an image. That's something that I also push forward with some of my students, is not to limit yourself with what you can't do, but just try to think of what you can do and use those materials that are within your own environment to make something.
That's amazing. Now, your materials give a lot of texture to your artwork. Remember, texture meaning the way that something actually feels or the way that something looks like how it feels. And your style, you said, is influenced by other artists from art history. Can you describe some of your influences?
When I was living in Portland, Oregon, I would go to this bookstore called Powell's Books. And within the stacks of their books, I would just go up and down the aisle, pulling out books on African-American artists. And I remember looking at a William H. Johnson monograph and thinking at that time, this is Catalog Raisonné, and thinking how his sensibility of his line, representation of his journeys and the people in his environment, and depicting his world and depicting African Americans' lifestyles was a direct representation of who I was. It's really important for me as an artist to have a representation of myself so that, you know, youth could see themselves in these particular environments like museums. So when they see my work, that with all the art history, whether it's from William H. Johnson to, you know, someone like David Hockney or Matisse, that when they're standing here, that they see themselves.
Well, that is fascinating. I want to thank you, Ms. Thomas, for coming on our show, and to all of you out there, have a wonderful night.
This has been another rendition of Art News with Edna Egelhofer. Good night.